Welcome to the video. To this video, I'm gonna be working on my 67 Ford Mustang. I'm actually gonna be installing a set of coilovers for the front. This is the part number. Stay tuned.
Music bed.
So the kit that I went with is a CPP Classic Performance coilover kit. So this is a very affordable, I would say. I did also get it on sale, but it retails for about $600 for your coilover kit, which is pretty much lower than any other kit around. So it does come with the springs. You can choose what spring rate depending if you have like a big block or small block, anything like that. I believe, and I can't remember, it's been a little while since I ordered these, but I believe I went with the lower weight because I have a small block in there. And I also have, fiberglass and things like that in the front end. So it's a little bit lighter, but this is pretty much, it comes with the biking shocks here, which are double adjustable. So that is something I'll have to kind of get used to. And it looks like it's pretty much already pre-assembled here. So there's the other one in here. And then these are the little hardware packet that it comes with. So let's just see what's in there before we kind of get started. I'm gonna end up having to move the car to this side of the garage so that I have room to work on it. I am kind of stepping away from the 2012 Mustang just to get this done. So there's a couple of events coming up that I want to obviously you get your stickers, so that's an extra 15 horsepower right there. Anti-seize must be applied to the shock treads before adjusting ride height, so that's on here. Just like any coilover, you have to do that. You have some instructions for this here, but it looks like it's already pretty much pre-done for you, so I'll just have to review that. It tells you the adjustment on the knobs, so the C and R, kind of what to set it up for comfort, handling, drag racing, things like that. So that's pretty neat to have. Another 5 horsepower and a whole nother of the same thing. So looks like we have some of the spanner wrench here to turn these, and then the little kind of like washers and bearings that go in here so that you can actually turn your, adjust your spring. So, and that's the main thing that I'm excited for, because right now my car I changed the springs twice. The first set of springs, they were really, really stiff, and I went ahead and cut them. It did lower it, but it was just so hard, but it was rubbing a little bit. This set of springs are a little bit softer, rides better. I put those compressors to kind of lower it, but it made it a little bit harder. So then I cut them. It was good, but then they settled more, and now it's very, very low. Which, I like the look like that, but it's just way too low on the bottom. And then, bumps, especially if I have passengers, the tires rub a little bit. And so I would like it a little bit higher, maybe like 3/4 of an inch or so. The back is still settling a little bit because I did put the leaf springs, as you remember in another video. But I would like the front a little bit higher. One, it would match a little bit better. Two, I can drive it anywhere because I do drive this car around, you know, to car shows and weekend and stuff like that, and I just hate for it to be scraping and rubbing every bump. And then the headers are really low since it's got the lot of long tubes in there, and so that just, you know, it just hits every, you know, speed bumps, things like that. So that's why I'm excited. This one I can actually turn it and race it if I need to, or I can turn it and lower it if I need to. So we have some hardware kit here to install all this stuff, and then last but not least, it looks like the piece that goes on the top. So this piece is kind of like the factory shock here on top, mounts to the shock tower, but this one's gonna have this piece through there, and then you just clip it with the clips, and it has the bolts that you can install it as well with the new hardware and everything. So it looks like it'd be pretty straightforward as far as getting it in there. I think the hardest part is going to get the old spring out of there. Hopefully, since I had cut them, like I said, it's a little bit easier. I may still have to get the spring compressor in there and kind of compress everything, but putting this on there sounds like it would be a little bit easier, just because it's kind of all one piece rather than mounting that spring on the lower control arm. And so here you get 2 washers and then a few of these clips that you put in between. So let me go ahead and get the car moved to this side here so I can start getting it all apart. We'll do one side at a time, and then I'll probably show completely one side start to finish, and you know, you just replicate on the other side. So let's get started. So I have my 67 Mustang in this side here. I'm gonna put it on jack stands, raise it up, and start putting the coilovers in there. Just for reference, I mean, you see how the tire is pretty tucked in there. I would like, ideally, I would just like about 1 inch up, just at the edge of the tire. And here on the back, I know I showed before from when I put the new rear leaf springs, which it rides really nice. It's not stiffer, but it's just the other ones were just very, very low. And so, you know, I have taken the car out, and if I have the kids in there, they would just drop way more. So I haven't driven it enough where I feel like the leaf spring is completely seated at the all the way, but you know, right now we have about maybe 1.25 inches, which is okay for right now. I can always add a small block like 3/4 to lower it if I need to later on. It's just the front, it dropped quite a bit, and I mean, right now, like, it drives okay straight, but when you turn, sometimes it rubs. Or if I hit a bump, which the roads here in New Mexico are pretty rough, so when I hit a bump, I mean, it's just hits in there. And same when I have passengers in the car, it just all kind of lowers a little bit, especially, you know, just a little bit, but then it, you know, makes it rough. So I don't like that because I drive it around and all that. So like I said, this is gonna give me nice adjustability where I can actually raise it or hopefully lower it to the spot I want to with this adjustment. So according to the ordering on these, you can go from 1 to 3 inches lower than factory, which is ideal. So I'm gonna start at the low end so we can get those leaf springs in there. Not leaf springs, coil springs in there, easy. And then I'll probably raise it about halfway and just start from there, and then I can always just adjust it a little at a time once I drive it a little bit. But let me get this in jack stands, get the jack in there, and then we'll get started. Okay, so once the vehicle is in jack stand secured, pop the hood because you're gonna need access to the top here to get the shocks, factory shocks, unbolted. I have 1/2 inch bolts here. It could be different if it's factory, but I think that's what came with in factory on these. And then while I'm here, I might put the strut tower brace. We'll see if I have time. I have to mount this transmission dipstick as well. It's kind of been just sitting there. I haven't really, had time to do a lot of that stuff. Last time I actually put a little bit of wire loom here because all these wires were just normal. Eventually I'm actually also gonna switch out this alternator because it's only about 100 and maybe 30 amps, something like that, which is not too bad, but really at idle it drops, with the electric fan and everything. And I have 2 electric fans, especially when I have the AC running. And so I did notice on the Coyote swap I did on the Challenger that the factory, newer Mustang alternator, I think they're like a 200 and some amps. So I'm gonna see if I can fit one of those in here. And I mean, those run without even plugging nothing in, almost like, this is kind of like a 1-wire alternator, the old school style, but higher amperage. This is an MSD alternator, which is really nice. It's chrome and everything, but I do need that extra amperage. So I may do that here in the future, just as a, kind of like an upgrade as well. But anyways, the strut tower brace, I did get the one that you go all the way across, but I cut it because I didn't want it to be connected. And it goes in those 2 bolts back there. And so since I'm gonna have this off, I may actually put it in there. It's somewhere in my parts corner over there. I think it's in one of those bins, so I may just get that out, get that on there. But we're gonna start taking these bolts off, and then we're gonna get down here, and this is where I have this little rubber things in here because it kind of sagged out quite a bit too much. But to get the spring in there, you have to compress it. But since we're gonna take this whole mount off and everything, I'm hoping that I can just unbolt it and just kind of take it out as it is. Maybe put the compressor so nothing kind of jumps out or anything, but we'll see what we do. All right, so to get started, what I'm gonna do is take off the shock bolts right here on top. These are 1/2 inch, like I mentioned before. And then I'll probably just remove these 3 tower bolts here. Once we get underneath, then I'm gonna take the shock bolts from the bottom off here, and then I'm probably gonna compress the spring just slightly. So let's get started up here. The new coil spring does come with all new hardware for all this, but I'm still gonna save these just in case. And if you have one of these impacts, it makes life a lot easier. All right, so down here at the bottom, it's gonna be a little bit tighter, so the shock bolts are right under here. And so I'm gonna, I think I used this, let's see, for my car it's 1/2 inch. Just to remove the bolt right here. That's tiny. On this side, you have to use just the ratchet in the socket because the control arm gets on the way. If I try to use an extension, the angle won't let it go in. So maybe unless you use a 1/4 inch, then you can do that. Gives you a little bit more room. Next to jack. And there's going to be a bushing underneath here. Keep track. Once we loosen the other side, we can probably remove it all. But so now that it's loose, it's the bottom of the bushing for the shock. That's all the mounts there. Now I'm gonna just come to the top and pull the shock out. It looks like for the coilover, we're gonna have to modify this little bolt mounts here, so I'll show that here in a little bit. But then now I'm gonna go ahead and get the coil spring compressors in here to try to compress this spring a little bit. Now that the shock is off though, I can loosen the jack under here. I guess you could have left it down, but just in case. And then put this thing in here. And you can rent these, or you can buy some on Amazon. They're not too expensive.
If you guys hear the breathing, it's this guy.
He likes to hang out. Man, got a freaking spider living on there.
Oh, don't even get me started on spider webs, bro. The truck. And since it's in the porch. Yeah.
I guess it's not bad just for one, but. Alright, I mounted one of them in there and then tying it up by hand. Gonna do the other one. We don't have to compress it too much, but it makes it a lot easier if you compress the spring a little bit so we can get it out. Keep in mind this springs I cut a little bit. I guess I cut too much, but it happens. It's my second set of springs that I cut too much on this car.
And that's why he has coilovers now.
Once you cut them, you can't go back. I cut them a little bit and they were too tall, and so I was like, I'll cut them more, and then they were perfect, but then once I drove it more, it was too low, so it was just pain in the butt. This coil spring compressors, it's a 3/4 inch bolt here, so we're just gonna tighten it up a little bit to compress it. That way we can pull this spring off. So I can't really get like a socket in here, so I'm just gonna use this. I can get the ratchet wrench on this side. Just be mindful as you tighten one side, it's gonna, you know, bend, and so you might get the wrench stuck in there. Like this side, there's nothing, so you're okay, but on the other side, it will get stuck depending how far you go. So. Want to do one side at a time.
Dude, you can't eat the camera.
All right. Technical difficulties with the dog, huh?
He's trying to eat the camera at this point.
It's almost where a point that I can probably pop this spring out here, but the other thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna loosen the nuts that go through here on the back side. I believe that was 5/8. And then I'm gonna grab my pry bar and see if I can pry that spring out of there. You know, once you compress it, it's pretty easy to take it out. If you have a factory spring, it's gonna be a lot harder because it's gonna be longer. So you're gonna have to compress it more than that. And then I loosen the perch nuts so I can actually just try to take the perch out. That makes it easier to take out. So you see there, just take this perch out and then the spring comes out. We're not gonna need this little isolators here on the bottom, but this is a factory piece there. And then I'm just gonna loosen this coilover, 3/4. Now I can actually use my impact.
If you guys want to buy, you can borrow these from the parts store too, or rent them. If you guys want to buy these, we did get them on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description too. If you guys work on cars a lot, comes in handy to have them.
If you go to the parts store, you can rent them for, I think, well, they used to be about $50, $60. And you get your money back when you give them back to them, but if you buy your own, you can just use them whenever. The nice thing is sometimes you go to the parts store and they're all rented out, so then you don't have a choice to rent one till one gets returned. Doesn't always happen, it just depends on the store. Some of them keep quite a bit of them in the shelves, some of them don't. So I did put some of these in there to kind of help, like I said, with the scraping, but it was just pretty low, and so it was just, you know, kept rubbing right here on the edge. I mean, there's a little bit of tire here, so we're gonna see. We're gonna get that coilover ready, pop it in there. It should be a lot easier. I am gonna take just a little bit of time to clean this control arm slightly and my lower control arm, so it just has some overspray from when I painted the car. So I'm just gonna do that lightly, and then we'll get that coilover ready to go. Alright, so to get this started, I put anti-seize on all the threads. I'm just running this collars all the way up and down so it gets on all the threads. Be careful with this stuff. You know, you touch it, you become the Tin Man. It gets on everything, so I'm not gonna say don't touch it, because you are going to touch it, but just have a rag around. But according to the instructions, we're gonna put this all the way down. And so that's got anti-seize on all the threads. I'm just gonna put just a little bit more in case we need to go up and down more. And then these are the collars. So if we use the bearing, which I am gonna use, it makes it easier to slide up and down. You put one of these washers on top, one on the bottom. So
Sandwich.
I'm gonna put just a little bit of anti-seize on one side of these. The one that's gonna go down against these collars. And then this is the bearing, see what I mean? Gonna put this stuff here. And on the other side. And this one I am gonna kind of work it in so it goes against all those needle bearings. And this is gonna go there on top of that washer. And then I'm just gonna use all this that is left over on my hands and put it over this washer here. Okay. So this is pretty much going to be almost ready to put in there. We do have the coil spring. And this coil spring is just going to ride on top of that like this. I should have a rubber isolator on that spring. Oh, yep, it is here. Just looking at the wrong spring. So I had put tape on this before to keep it from falling off. So I'm just gonna cut it, and then I didn't think about buying new ones. I should have ordered new ones for these, but I'm just gonna use this one. I'm gonna take the tape off, put it on top, and then put a little bit of tape on there. Okay, so I put the isolator here on the top. The spring is just gonna go on top here of the coilover. There's our coilover ready to install. So we're just gonna go back in the control arm. I have the bolts with the nuts. These are nylon locking nuts, so they don't need a pressure washer. And since this spring kind of rides on top of this, it's shorter than those ones. As you can see, those are about probably 15 inches right there. This is about 12, so it should be a lot easier to pop in there. Famous last words, but hey,
That's your car, it'll go smooth.
get it on there, and there we are. I did get that stuff on my finger, so you know, just remember to wipe it. And then this shaft here is going to be bolted to the control arm, kind of like the other factory piece, but I'm just going to try to twist this a little bit. I'll try to put a nut here or a bolt. So you can kind of see it's maybe use this. There we go. So I just twisted it so it's got the same angle as the control arm, so it makes it easier to put that bolt in there. Same on this side. So that's pretty much there. I'm just going to put the nuts here on the bottom. And the other one here. So I gotta say, a lot easier to get this in here than the other stuff. And then now I'm gonna get my wrench and socket. And this is gonna be 9/16 on both sides. And just tying this up. And to be honest, before anyone asks, I didn't see no torque specs on the instructions, so I'm just gonna tighten it till it's tight. Use your judgment if you wanna use the factory torque specs from these bolts, although they're different. You know, that's, I guess, up to everyone. Nice thing, this ones have the nylon locking nuts, so they're not just gonna come loose easily unless you take those nuts on and off multiple times. When they get worn out, they shouldn't come off at all. So that's pretty much here at the bottom end. I am gonna grab a screwdriver real quick because we're gonna put the tire on there and lower the car, because up here the shock is, even the factory one was pretty short, so factory one I had to lower the car so it went all the way up to mount it. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna lower the car and actually put the top here on there. You might be able to, I did put a jack on the control arm earlier because I was working on the other side just to see, and it doesn't come all the way through kinda before it starts lifting the car, so I think the whole way will help with that. One thing I am gonna do, just in case I don't need to take the tire back off, is I'm gonna adjust the shock. So I'm just gonna go to the top of the comfort, between comfort and handling. So I'm just gonna do 7 and 8. And that's the nice about these Viking shocks, double adjustable. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the R knob, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. The other thing I am gonna do is turn this collar up. On the instructions it says to go about 1/3 of the way up and then start from there, so I'm gonna do that. Go about 1/3, leave it in there, and then see where the right height is at. So definitely this is gonna be so much nicer to lower it or raise it than cutting a spring, because, well, it didn't work out for me twice already. So I mean, it looked cool, I guess, but since I drive the car a lot, I want it to be practical. I don't want it to be rubbing everywhere. So plus the headers are pretty low, and so being too low, I'm just, you know, it's gonna scrape everywhere. And then when you adjust this, you do the top one to the height you want, and then this bottom piece, technically it's like a locking collar. So you just raise it up, and then you just kind of tighten it. Like on the Challenger, the kit came with 2 wrenches, so you can hold the top and tighten up the bottom. This one only came with 1, but I do have the other ones. For right now though, I'm gonna get a tape measure and measure the other side coil over, just so I leave them at the same distance here at the bottom. And then that's gonna be our base. So let me do that, and then we'll lower it and we'll get working on top. Here on this top mount, you have these, they're almost like the little nuts for the shock. Now, the coilover, it's thicker, so it does come with some bolts that go right in these threads, but the other ones that have a locking nut, they're thicker bolts. So what I'm gonna do, and like I said, the instructions doesn't really say anything about this, but it doesn't even say anything about using the longer bolts. The longer bolts are also thicker. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to remove these little nuts here so that I can put the nut underneath and do it that way. And I'm thinking I can probably, hopefully, get a nut underneath there, but we'll see what happens. So really the main thing is I'm gonna get a drill bit. This is probably about a 3/16, and there are 2 little dimples. You can kind of see them in there where that piece is welded to that. And so I'm just gonna drill it out. On both sides. Now you want to drill enough to go through only the nut part on there. Don't go all the way through. So, and then I'm just gonna grab this chisel, and as you can kind of see in there, it's already coming off. And there we are. So we're gonna take that off, and then I'm gonna drill this hole just a little bit bigger so I can put the thicker bolt on there. So Let me drill this other one out. Okay. Same thing. I'm gonna put the chisel through here. And that's off of there. So now I can just get the bigger drill bit, and hopefully this is a drill bit that's good and not all, but you should do this on a piece of wood in case you go all the way through and you hit the floor, you don't damage your drill bit. So don't do what I'm doing, do what I'm saying that you're supposed to do. But that's just a little bit bigger, and that's gonna make it so that I can actually put these bolts here that come with this kit. They're a little bit thicker, so they will actually fit through there. So let me get that ready, and then we'll install it on the coilover. Okay, so now that we got the tires on the car, I'm gonna lower it so it's seats back on there, and that's gonna push that shock up. And so that should give us enough room for us to be able to put the spring perch up here. One thing to remember is, differently from the factory piece, is that don't put the shaft in here, because this is not gonna be able to go over it once you have that shaft in there. So put this in here and then put the shaft in there, because if not, you can't put this in there. So I am gonna, like I mentioned before, I did put these bolts a little bit bigger. I am gonna just run my drill bit through these bolts so that way it's easier to line it up. It was already in there, but it was kind of hard to get in there, so that's just gonna clean it up a little bit. And then now that I remember, I do need to I dropped the nut underneath, so I need to raise it again and go fetch it before we get it put on there. Alright, so I'm gonna put this in here, and like I mentioned before, I did run a drill bit through these. They're still a little bit tight, but you have to put it in there and then put that shaft. And what we're gonna do is put the shaft in there. That is a really hard piece to put on there, just so everyone knows. So that's gonna take a little bit of work, and then I'm gonna lift this piece up and attach it to the bolts, because I have to get the nut underneath, since I did end up going with this kit right here. So or this is what comes with the car, but instead of using the factory bolts, and also mine were, a couple of them were a little bit stripped, and so I didn't want them to, you know, strip out and then the shock kind of hit the hood or anything, because, you know, this is pretty close to the hood. But this is the ones that come with the kit. They're a lot thicker than the ones that were factory in there. So, but I do have to hold the nut underneath and then put a socket to tighten it up. So we're gonna get that done on there. This piece, you have to push it through there, so that's what's really hard, because if it's really tight, and then you have to put these snap rings. So I'll put one in there that's gonna stay in there, and then once it goes through, just because the bushing kind of pushes out a little bit, so it's really hard to get the next one. You have to, what I was using was like vice grips and then a C-clamp to push it together, so that snap ring goes in there. So let me get the snap ring pliers. Now if you don't have a good set of snap ring pliers, go get yourself a really nice set. Mine are pretty ghetto, so as you can see I had to put both of them together because the bolt strips, so I need to go buy myself a set. But they're working for now, so we're gonna use these. But you have to pull these apart and then you're gonna put it in there. And like I said, I did put some lubricant in there for the bushing. And I'm gonna put some more on here, but it's still gonna be a good pain in the butt to get this in there. So I think overall this is almost the hardest part of the whole install for this kit. I think they sell a kind of like a metal one that you can remove these bushings, and it's like a ball metal bushing for the top that you can upgrade this to. So maybe later on, once these wear out, I'll go with that kit, but for now I'm just going with the factory piece that comes in there. So we're gonna just try to push it in there. I'm gonna wipe my hands because I have this stuff all over me. I'm actually gonna use a screwdriver here just to help me push.
Why did that one seem like it went in smoother?
Seems like it, but if you can come in closer, you can see this outer bushing kind of pushed out a little bit. That little bit of a, and so that's gonna kind of keep that snap ring from going in. So that's the hard part. Now hopefully if this bushing kind of goes in there, but yeah, that's what's gonna make it hard to put the bushing in there, or the snap ring. Okay, so I'm just gonna put the snap ring and then just kind of compress them until it falls into the groove. But that's really the hard part, though. As you push it in, it's gonna push the other one. I guess I could have held like a, you know what? If I put a socket on one end, that's probably gonna help.
Oh, on the C-clamp.
Yeah, just put like a socket on this side, a socket on the other side. Maybe not that big of a socket though. Let me get a shorter one. There's something. Let's see, this might make it not as hard. Nope. A bigger seat back here, so let's see if this works.
So in other words, tools required. Everything they say plus a C-clamp for sure.
A C-clamp and some, I don't know. So hopefully, let's see how this works. We really just need that bushing to push back in there flat. I think this might work. So.
It's not sliding all over the place like earlier. So.
Well.
Well, if anything, you can maybe use that same socket to push the snap ring in the
Yep.
little notch.
And then you'll hold it in place just because it comes back out. But well, let's get my
2-in-1. Well,
2-in-1 pliers here. we had merch like other YouTubers, I'll be like, go buy my merch so I can buy some pliers. So, ain't got jack squat. Alright. There we go. This is the last use for these, okay? I am gonna get new ones. That's what I say till the next video comes out.
So we said about the spring compressors, remember?
Hey, we got new ones finally. So. After we almost
died.
had them explode, but hey. Come on.
I think they fell into place now because of the.
Oh yeah, it's pushed together.
Yeah. Oh, see, look. We made it look easy. That side, not so much.
Okay. So that's in there. I guess that made it not too bad. So now I'm just gonna trim this. And then, like I mentioned before, we're gonna actually put the bolts here on top.
And then you gotta jack up the car too.
Well, not yet. Let me put the bolts.
Okay.
So just let it be dropped. We're gonna put these bolts on there, and then we'll jack up the car so it goes down and put those 3 bolts on there. So let's get that on there. Just don't drop that nut because then you have to fish it. I guess the other thing you can do is weld this nut on the bottom. You know, I could have done that, and that way you don't have to worry about
Are those nylon though?
holding it. It is nylon, so yeah, that's probably gonna melt.
Maybe do a pressure washer.
You know, maybe weld a regular nut, put a pressure washer on the top. You can use the factory ones like the kit comes with, I guess. Also, you don't want to deal with this, but I opted to go with this bigger bolts on here. So, okay. And then, yeah, where's my socket? So if you just use a short socket, you can get under here, hold it. While you screw this one on there. One tip that I did notice is before you turn the adjustment on the coilovers, if you just leave them all the way at 0, they seem to extend a little bit farther and move easier up and down. So you can just wait till you're done, because you can just push this down instead of having to jack up the car. Since I already adjusted it, they're pretty stiff, but if you don't move that, you can move them by hand. So that might be easier than having to raise the car up and down like I am. Another thing we learned as we went. on this side so I can just move it to center it a little bit more.
So moving, or do you want me to tighten it while you push it?
It's all right, so that's bolted on. So now Junior's gonna raise up the car and I'm just gonna guide that shock tower down those 3 bolts. And yep, keep going. There we go. Put these nuts on there. And there we are. That's the install and the coilovers for the 67 Ford Mustang. Now,
it's not too bad. Oh, there we go.
they're probably gonna drop a little bit more, which I have to drive it. As of right now, I think it's about a whole inch higher. But as you saw on the coilover, we were about 1/3 up. So, I mean, I could go quite a bit lower if I wanted to, but I can also go quite a bit higher. I mean, I have probably like 2 more inches to go, which is not as much as I wanted. That's kind of where I want it to be, right there. Once I drive it, I may have to adjust it a little bit higher because I'm sure it might drop a little bit and settle down, but not too bad of an install, really. This top part's just a little bit harder, although that side was a little bit easier than when I did this side. So use that socket to push that together. And actually, when you're first putting it in, if you just use the socket, it's probably not going to push it out. So that's one area that I could have done better from the get-go. But that's pretty much it. I'm going to drive it around, see where it settles, and then, I can adjust it. All I got to do is jack up the car, get the wrench in there, and raise it or lower, and lower it back, and that's it. So I really like it. Everything installs really nice. All the hardware is really good. It came with a lot more hardware in here. So like I mentioned, it has new bolts for the top. These are the factory size. It has these that are, I guess you could use them on the bottom or on top, but they are wider, so you will have to drill it out. And then all the nuts and everything. So I didn't use that. It did come with an extra washer for each one. And then this one, I didn't have to use it with that pin on the top. But that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, comments, leave them below. Subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.
Peace.